Welcome to today's episode of the Daily Coffee Pro by Mapper Forward, friends. Today on the podcast, we're talking about a long overdue correction for the coffee industry. And this episode may seem from the title that it's all about doom and gloom. That's not what we mean by a correction for the coffee industry. This is just a natural progression that happens when you have a market that is saturated for far too long. Some people think of these kinds of things as bubbles, which is one way that you could look at it, but it's different than that. We have a saturated market, and when you have a saturated market that is not respecting the value chain the way that it needs to be respected, you see an imbalance start to occur at one particular point along the value chain. And that bubble is concentrated with different people along the road based on which part of the coffee industry that you're looking at. So if we look at the commodity market versus the specialty market, you'll notice that success is concentrated in different places, I guess, for each of those two different markets. Today, we're going to talk about how the veil has been lifted on the coffee industry, and there are different corrections happening along the value chain everywhere in both the commodity and the specialty market. So I guess we'll start with the ICO report that the International Coffee Organization released a report in August that showed that for 2 months in a row, we have seen the price of coffee on the C market increase, which is a first for the last couple of years. And this is a really good sign for people that are dealing in commodity coffee, because the coffee price crisis, this isn't in any way showing that that's coming to an end. But what it is showing is that the correction that we spoke about at the beginning of the pandemic that could eventuate, which was because migratory workers and logistical issues that were being experienced at origin would prevent the specialty market from being able to necessarily execute on what their plans were. What you might see is a shortfall in the supply of specialty coffee, and more of that coffee going into the commodity market, and therefore, because of the lack of supply of specialty, there may be an increase in the demand for commodity. Now, we have absolutely seen an increase in the demand for commercial grade coffee through the increase of supermarkets that have seen huge accelerations in their sales revenue for supermarket coffee. And so because of that, what we're seeing is because more people are brewing at home, there's more of a demand for commercial grade coffee, and the market has responded by having the supply for that, and the price has elevated in response. Now, I don't want to oversimplify that. There has been, obviously, as we would expect, the role of speculators, and they are people who just play the C market as though it was a game to them. They, of course, play a role in influencing that, but it's great to see that we have started to shift return some of the success that's needed and the fairness that's needed to producers that has been weighted heavily on the end of the consumer sales side of things. And so that's a correction that is starting to eventuate from what's happened in 2020. The next thing that is correcting itself, and I hope it continues to correct itself, is that the business model viability has been drawn into question. As a result of 2020, the stresses that have been imposed on business owners have revealed that the business model that we have and the one that we have been operating on just is no longer tenable. It's no longer viable. And the slightest stress test would have exposed that. But this isn't a slight stress test. 2020 has been an extreme stress test, which saw many businesses just falter under the weight of the stress that has been placed, or the demands that have been placed upon them for 2020. Now, what are some of those things that we're speaking of? When businesses are operating at 3% net profit and then being told that they're only able to operate at 50% or at 25%, what that means is the 3% net profit that they were operating at, which was barely allowing them to survive, is completely absorbed and they're into negative straight away with no notice, with no kind of opportunity to adapt or take the time to adapt. People had to think on their feet and adapt very quickly and absorb a lot of the losses that they had to cop for the first few months of what is coming to eventuate into what may be an event that lasts for a couple of years. Now, businesses that had greater access to capital or were able to adapt quicker will be able to create a longer runway before they have to close. But it's not down to luck, but a lot of it is down to how quickly you can adapt and how well you built your business model. So if you were operating at 3 to 6% net profit, you're going to run out of a runway within a month. You won't survive a month without an adaptive way to generate income. So the correction has been that businesses that were not operating with a long-term viability strategy that is different from the standard business model have found a correction in this year. The correction is that they either have to adapt or close. And with more and more businesses closing, what we are starting to see emerge is the business models that are more healthy, and they are going to be the models that we hope will continue to thrive and live on and set a new standard into the future. The third correction that 2020 has seen emerge in the coffee industry is that workplace relations and power dynamics have emerged as a very obvious and open discussion topic in all businesses. And this is long overdue for our industry. This is not just a race thing. This is not just a gender thing. This is not just a sexual orientation thing. This is a everything thing. There's nothing that says that you can't be a part of a minority group and still be an asshole. The resentment that you've accumulated from being a part of a minority group may also feed the power that you think that you can have to be derogatory and demeaning towards women or to trans folks or whatever it is. This is about power. And this year has presented our industry with the opportunity to really look at itself. As I've said many times before, the lack of a barrier to entry into our industry means that there's no leadership training required. There's no kind of understanding of what your value statements are going to be or what your capabilities are with regards to running a business that looks after you, your customers, your staff, and the value chain. So the power dynamic isn't just about the workplace relation that you have. It's about the workplace relationships that you feed into through your business. And how are you cultivating that? How are the power dynamics being expressed through the brand that you have? How are you respecting the value chain with your awareness of what your power dynamics are? And that's, to me, it's really, really exciting. Having been on the receiving end of a lot of inequality in the industry, and I had to learn how to be assertive. I had to learn how to set boundaries. If you haven't checked out the assertiveness training that we have available for the coffee industry, I think you'll find it incredibly valuable if you find this to be an issue for you, whether you be too aggressive or you be too passive. And the fourth and final thing that is a long overdue correction for our industry is that we have too many vulnerabilities across our industry that we haven't paid attention to, and specifically employee vulnerability. We have too many employees who are accepting work situations that are unrealistic and not sustainable long term. And what this does is it creates an underpinning for our industry that's self-sabotaging. If we're not cultivating the idea that we should be conspiring to each other's success, whatever your small ecosystem is, if you're not conspiring to the success of everybody in that ecosystem, you are self-sabotaging. So if you're not creating an environment that allows your employees to thrive, and you as an employee are not choosing employers that will allow you to thrive, we are going to continue to perpetuate an industry that doesn't conspire to its long-term success. And we'll get these corrections needing to happen again and again. Now, in the next episode, we're going to talk about the consequence of how we got here. And we've kicked the can down the road by not addressing these things. And in the next episode, we're going to talk about why we did that and why it served us and where we go from here. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, friends. Peace, love, and peanut butter. Have an amazing rest of your day.